Let's start this off with a disclaimer. The copy of the game I played was a pre-release review key I got from the devs at Feel Better Games because I'm a big shot. This carries two connotations. One, this game kept being patched until release day, so my experience with the technical side of the game may not be the exact same as what you'll get. Two, I paid nothing, and that may carry some implicit bias in how I view the game. With that out of the way, let's get right to it. Mask of the Rose, available on PC and Switch, is the fourth entry in the Fallen London ludic universe, which also includes Sunless Sea, Sunless Skies, and the browser game that started it all, Fallen London itself. If you're unaware of the setting, let me give you a crash course. In the 19th century, for whatever reason, the city of London found itself transported to an underground realm called the Neath. More than just being a cave where the sun doesn't shine, it is a plane in itself, with laws of physics and logic working completely different from what you'd expect. Soon enough, the British realized they share space with literal devils, living icebergs and spiders infesting one's dreams. And before any of these groups could say hi, the British started colonizing the place. And then, in Sunless Skies, they took off into outer space in steam locomotives. I always have trouble telling people about Fallen London, because trying to summarize it like that, it sounds like the kind of genre fiction that slaps cogs and tentacles onto a top hat and then calls itself steamy Lovecraft. But it's one of my most beloved fictional settings of all time. I mentioned once that Glorantha is my favorite world that is not rooted in real-world history. Fallen London has the same top spot for a setting that is. It's just a lovingly woven tapestry of historical references, some truly unique cosmology, and just plain old weird stuff. It is always confusing on first contact, but the more and more you get to zoom out by learning about the world, the more you see all those lines interconnect and understand what's going on. It's genuinely magical. And the confusion is the name of the game for Mask of the Rose, because rather than take place after the events of any of these games or between the titles, it depicts events taking place only a few months after London saw the sun for the last time, in February 1862. While Sunless Sea and Skies are exploration-based role-playing games that I need to make a video on someday, Mask of the Rose is a visual novel with a leaning towards being a romance with some murder in the background. You make a character and get introduced to some people sharing a boarding house with you, with your job being to go out into the city of London to gather census data, which includes everyone's romantic situation. Every in-game day you have time to make two actions, be it finding a new district in town to get census data on the people there, getting flirty with someone, or getting back to your landlady to pay rent that you've been missing for several months now. There isn't enough time to do everything, let alone everyone, so you need to pick your battles. Do you care more about trying to solve a murder mystery that unravels, or about forming connections with others? Or maybe you go all in on the census work? I've made 4 full runs of the game, which were about 4 hours each, and I've met completely different characters in some cases, let alone where and how I decided to take my personal story. It's definitely the kind of game where you need to define some end goal, even if vaguely, because trying to be a completionist will only end in frustration, which has been the design principle for all Feel Better games so far. Pick your battles and come back to pick other ones after you fight them. Mask of the Rose is a bit of an outlier in the series due to how human it is. In other titles in the series, the characters are, more often than not, described with titles and epitaphs, such as the Last Constable, the Jovial Contrarian, and so forth. But here we have Grizz, Archie, David. The fall is so recent that people are still adjusting. The entire situation is new to almost everyone involved. Learning ways to navigate the now labyrinthian streets, trying to learn of the city's new masters and the bazaar in the center of it, trying to get in contact with family left on the surface. It's not a story in which you will learn the truths of the Neath or correct some great injustice inherent to the new London. It's a story of people trying to survive and make sense of a world they found themselves in without their consent. The game really nails this tone of low-key horror, and people are just learning to adapt to it. Oh, don't let the huge shrieking bat at the roof of the church scare you, it just comes around sometimes and will probably one day tear me to shreds, but I don't care about my own well-being anymore. Have you heard a good word about Jesus, by the way? When it comes to the vibes, it really reminded me of Valhalla. It's not about fixing the world as much as finding the things we're fighting for, though with much more narrative freedom than in the one visual novel that altered my brain chemistry forever all those years ago. And because of this relatively high levels of humanity, I think it's as good of a starting point for the series as any. The suspension of disbelief needed to buy in is much lower than usual, and the game will throw some juicy questions your way to poke at in the other titles. Not that the other games are a bad starting point either, but they do ask you to get into a certain mindset to get the most out of them. Speaking of narrative freedom, I really have to comment just how much the game has going for it in this aspect. When I heard it's going to be a quasi-dating sim, I had my reservations. But right out of the gate you get to not only define your character's name and title, but also romantic inclinations. You might want to fully commit yourself, or just look for friendship, or maybe just the physical aspects of a relationship without any romance. And then you are further defined by your own actions early on. If you decide in the first convo that your defense mechanism is turning everything into a joke, you get a chance to do that for a lot of dialogues later as well, as just one example. Some big plot elements are bound to happen, of course, but they are mostly linked to eating supper with your housemates every evening. In everything else, you can do whatever the heck you please. The game is also really good at avoiding the trappings one would expect from branching dialogue trees, which is to say, it's not giving you one different line after you make your choice and then proceeding as before. The conversation truly shifts without a chance to go back. For example, on my first run, I always handed my reports to Mr. Pages alone and got to ask some questions. But on the second run, I handed them in with Grease, who gave me this job present, which led to the conversation going in a completely different way, with me saying too much and outright losing the job on the second day of employment. I guess the landlady needs to wait a bit more for her money. Meh. This freedom, of course, extends to the options in how to approach romantic interests. You wanna become friends with the nice lady who got you the job? Get frisky with a sad boy medical student from Scotland? Figure out how to make a romantic relationship work with a hulking monstrosity covered in a cloak that barely even speaks English? Or maybe you just want to play matchmaker between a devil and a Jewish writer of scandalous romance? Go for it! Happy Pride, everyone! Surprisingly, you can also delve into being on less than pleasant terms with folks. Maybe by presenting yourself as authority and pushing on sensitive topics. Or maybe just because some bastard needs to be sent the equivalent of a doctored in a paperback for thinking they're too good to speak with you. Mask of the Rose explores all matters of the heart, including petty joy derived from being mean sometimes, as a treat. I was also surprised that scenes of, shall we say, physical intimacy were not cut to black. Nothing explicit is shown, nor is it written like an IKEA manual on what's going down, but there are definitely descriptions of how each character would approach a sexual encounter, serving as further characterization. It was a nice bonus for sure, though if it's not to your liking, you will not miss any gameplay content or a vital clue by refusing to take your clothes off. Speaking of characterization, I liked pretty much all of the characters involved in the story. Learning about them is like 80% of the fun, so I'm not gonna say much here to avoid spoilers, but everyone has a few layers to them. Some secrets they don't want to talk about, some regrets, some soft spot you can Z-target and punch them in. Everyone is unique, and you always need to keep in mind who you're talking to. Being forthcoming with an elderly lady, trying her best to make a home for strays like you, is good etiquette. But keeping the same level of straightforwardness when sharing tea with devils is just asking to be exploited. There are two systems I'm a bit lukewarm on. First is the choice of apparel influencing your reactions with characters, including one article of clothing you're gonna get no matter what based on your background. I like the idea, and playing dress up has always been a big part of Fallen London, but because of how limited your time is, going out to town to get a hat always feels like a waste. I like that they give you more options in dialogue and that they are clearly marked, and that you can get a smart dressed rat and put it on your head, but I feel like the concept has much more potential than how it looks in execution due to that one limitation. Money is not easy to come by either, much for the same reason. I kinda wish there were transferable between saves or something, though I feel like that might mess with your options to interact with the shopkeepers. Though there are some ways to, let's say, get locations and garments free of any temporal or monetary cost, this can prove a bit frustrating on the first few playthroughs. The other system is story crafting. Once again, it's a brilliant idea, having to come across bits and pieces, ideas and names across the main game, to then put them together into something akin to a coherent narrative to then present it to someone. Be it speculation on what the powers that be are plotting, or helping a friend with the next chapter of her novel. And because the approach to it is rather freeform and you get way more moving parts than you could ever ask for, it really requires you to think. But at the same time, it took me a hell of a long time to figure out that I just need to construct anything to even move forward with the idea. I was trying to build an idea of how a murder happened, and I was getting frustrated that I can't even talk to people involved. Turns out, I had to have even a half-baked idea to get the option to ask people if the people I'm suspecting had a possible motive. Which I get, but again, due to the time restriction on the events, that was not the first, second or third idea that came to my mind. And it took me my 4th playthrough to even get a hang of the system enough to get the resolution to what happened. Granted, 2 of my playthroughs were more concerned about hanging out with a squid person or trying to woo a shopkeeper because I think her hair is really nice. In summary, I do like Mask of the Rose quite a bit, though I am not the kind of person that will go completely mental over it. Another VN beat it to the punch by God, 7 years. But I do intend to play it more and, at the very least, try to see all possible events. I've played these games enough to know that I will see a bigger picture interlocking all of things I've seen so far, sooner or later. And I'm gonna fuck a squidman. And maybe get involved in getting civil rights for rats of the city. And pay my rent on time at least once. In real life too. So if you were ever interested in Fallen London as a setting, this may be a good jumping in point for you. If you are already a fan of the setting, seeing the early days of the city's fall is incredibly interesting, and getting to point at the screen and scream "I know what that means!" is always fun. If you are unsure, I mean, hey, Fallen London itself is a free browser game. Go get a taste and see how you like its tone and writing. There are 14 years of content in this bad boy. Just remember, truth burns like fire. But isn't some light what we need most in this sunless place? Hey, thanks for watching. The gap between this video and the next one is gonna be longer than usual, cause I'll be away from my PC for the first half of July. As usual, huge thanks go to my Patreon supporters bankrolling these videos. The fear of disappointing them keeps me awake and productive. I'll see you all next time with something.